They always tell you trouble walks in unannounced. But in my case, it came rumbling across the North Meadow at 7:40 in the morning, a roaring yellow beast chewing through the tranquility. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, the good, strong kind, watching the Colorado mist still clinging to the pine line, thinking it was going to be a perfect day. Then I heard it. Steel and diesel tearing into the silence like a bear ripping open a tin can. This is Elk Ridge County, the quiet side, and that land, that 12 acres of meadow and ponderosa I call home, has been in the Cahill family since 1958. My grandfather signed the deed before he left us, and it's surrounded by nothing but wild sagebrush, stubborn rocks, and a peace you genuinely cannot buy in those manicured suburbs. My property is a house I rebuilt myself, a rusty Quonset hut I use for tools, and that wide-open northern field, part natural sanctuary, part critical buffer zone, between my solitude and the sprawling new development, the Aspen Crest Estates. By the time I reached my old rusted boundary fence in my beat-up Ford, the crew was already 50 feet deep into what used to be tall grass and prime nesting grounds for the red-tailed hawks. The excavator operator, a young guy with mirrored shades, was doing exactly what he was told, no questions asked. Two other guys with clipboards were staking out what looked suspiciously like a future asphalt parking lot. I killed my engine, stepped out, and walked straight into their war zone. "Shut it down!" I barked. The engine died instantly. The operator shrugged, which, to be fair, was the right reaction for him. Then the foreman showed up, clipboard in hand, wearing that HOA-branded reflective vest that screams, "I've already sold my soul. What's your price?" "Sir, you can't be here during active site prep," he said, talking to me like I was trespassing on my own soil. "This is my land," I replied, keeping my voice low and steady, pointing to a rusted corner post, half swallowed by weeds, a marker that stood there since before these cookie-cutter estates even existed. "You are standing on private property." He didn't even blink. He flipped a page on his clipboard. "We have a service contract from the Aspen Crest HOA. This section has been designated for community overflow parking and pedestrian access to the river trail." "Funny," I said, "because last time I checked, it was designated for deer, hawks, and my own damn solitude." I told him very clearly to get his machines and his clipboards off my land before I called the county sheriff. He didn't move, so I called them. When the two deputies arrived, young guys, one of them looked like he still had his high school football number tattooed on his arm, they walked the line with me. They looked at the crew's contract, and they nodded sympathetically, but then came the predictable bad news. "Mr. Cahill, this appears to be a civil boundary issue. They're not breaking down your door. No one's armed. It is not criminal trespass under state law. So, they can just show up, dig a crater in my property, and that's fine." I snapped. "We're not saying it's fine," the older deputy countered. "We're saying it's a dispute. You'll need to take this to court." They offered to write a report, no arrests. No order to vacate, just a pen, a clipboard, and a half-hearted good luck. By noon, the machines were off my property only because I physically stood in front of them until they packed up and left. But the ruts were still there, deep enough to swallow a truck tire. I spent the rest of the day writing a cease and desist, referencing state property codes and attaching a copy of my deed. Then I printed out 3 large private property, no access, HOA jurisdiction ends. Here signs, laminated them like I was prepping for a hurricane, and drove 4-foot steel stakes into the ground, just off the property line. That night, my phone rang twice, once from a blocked number I didn't answer, and once from a woman named Doris, one of the Aspen Crest residents, who politely informed me that I was being unneighborly. I thanked her for her concern and told her to watch her step near the new fence line, because some of those steel stakes weren't rounded on top. What got me wasn't just the audacity, it was the certainty. The pure, unadulterated assumption that if land looks unused, it's fair game. That if a field lies fallow, it belongs to the neighborhood to decorate. That some paper pusher with a gavel can decide where your borders begin and end. These HOA types, they don't knock on doors. They print maps and hold votes behind closed doors, and when they want something you have, they just move in. Well, I don't move easily. Not for backhoes, not for clipboards, and sure as hell not for HOA meetings. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. A few laminated signs, a cease and desist, a little daylight confrontation that should have put a stop to the nonsense. Turns out I was wildly, dangerously optimistic. 3 days later, I walked out to find a handmade poster zip-tied to my front gate. "I live in community. Be part of it." It was spray-painted in a cheerful blue and yellow on what looked like a recycled campaign banner. Underneath it, in a bright red Sharpie, were about 40 signatures. Later that afternoon, I noticed a group gathering on the sidewalk just outside my northern boundary. Lawn chairs, kids with juice boxes, someone passing out cookies. It was a tailgate party, except they'd planted themselves directly in front of my fence. Then the woman with the megaphone started reading from what she called a community resolution, demanding that I reconsider my position and align with the greater good. And there she was, front and center, in a bright purple pantsuit and aviator sunglasses. Vanessa Thorne. I'd only seen her in passing before, maybe at the local coffee shop, but now she was standing there like General Patton at the front lines, full of righteous, patriotic indignation. "Mr. Cahill!" she called through the megaphone, her voice echoing across my meadow. "This land is an opportunity to unify Aspen Crest. We're offering you a chance to contribute to something bigger than yourself." I stepped onto my porch and raised my coffee thermos in a mock salute. "I already contributed," I called back. "I contributed by not letting a bulldozer roll through a hawk's nest." She gave me that tight, bureaucratic smile, the kind you show a dog just before you take it to the vet. That evening, my private property signs were gone. Not blown down, not knocked over, gone. Someone had clipped the zip ties and walked off with them. I replaced them immediately, this time using bolted steel plates and a post-hole digger to drive the point home. The next day, someone drove their point home. I woke up to the smell of chemicals and something metallic. On the eastern stretch of fence, the word "park" had been scrolled in thick red enamel spray, and underneath it, "Get out or grow up." It took me an hour to scrub off the worst of it. Another hour to install motion sensor lights. I started noticing unfamiliar SUVs parked at odd angles near the edge of my property. Not surveillance vans, but too curious for comfort. A young guy in a windbreaker walked the boundary with a tablet in hand, stopping every 10 feet to type something. When I asked who he was, he said he was collecting neighborhood feedback. I told him I had some feedback too. He didn't stick around for it. Later that week, a glossy pamphlet appeared in every mailbox on my road, except mine, naturally, titled "Building Our Future." It featured a beautiful digital mock-up of a community recreation zone, complete with a splash pad, picnic tables, and a gazebo, all perfectly superimposed on what was unmistakably my northern field. A line at the bottom read, "Proposed site pending alignment, pending alignment." My ass. That evening, I called a friend of mine from my old Army engineering days, a guy who now works as a security consultant. He helped me source a wireless trail camera system, infrared, motion-sensitive cloud upload. We set up 5 units, mostly hidden along the fence and access paths. If anyone came snooping again, they wouldn't leave without a close-up photo. The cherry on top came Sunday morning. I opened my mailbox to find a stiff form letter printed on HOA letterhead, signed by Vanessa Thorne, formally accusing me of violating the spirit of neighborhood cooperation. They called my refusal to allow shared development a disruption to communal harmony, and said I was forcing the HOA to take legal review of boundary inconsistencies. The phrase hit me like a shovel to the gut. They weren't just being annoying. They were preparing to challenge my property lines. I laid out everything I had, copies of the deed, original survey maps, drone footage from last year, my grandfather's notarized land record from 1978. This was getting ugly and personal. They weren't trying to negotiate. They were trying to corner me, isolate me, paint me as some cranky recluse hoarding land like a dragon guarding treasure. And just like clockwork, the lawsuit came in a stiff white envelope stamped official correspondence. That particular flavor of paper that smells like toner and the collapse of trust. Inside was a lawsuit, neatly stapled and bullet-pointed. The HOA was suing me for obstruction, malicious interference, and my personal favorite, violation of the cooperative spirit. But what really made my blood run cold was the final claim, that the boundary between my land and Aspen Crest was legally ambiguous and required judicial clarification. They were trying to redraw the map. I wasted no time. I called a local firm and got connected with a lawyer named Arthur Vance. Mid-50s, clean-cut, a Bluetooth headset that blinked like a pacemaker for his ego. He sounded confident. "Sounds like classic HOA overreach," he said, flipping through my deed. "They're trying to establish dominion through ambiguity. We can beat this." He filed a motion to dismiss, told me to stay calm, but something didn't sit right. He deflected every time I brought up the damage from the excavation, and he never seemed interested in the trail cam footage. Once, when I showed him a video of a group of HOA members holding an impromptu community prayer on the edge of my field, he actually laughed. "Optics like that could hurt you in court, Mr. Cahill. You don't want to seem hostile to community values." "Community values don't include trespassing." I snapped. Then the court issued a temporary injunction, preventing me from interfering with approved community enhancement efforts pending the outcome of the suit. In other words, I couldn't stop them from continuing construction on my land. Vance called it a procedural hiccup. So, construction resumed. I stood on my porch with binoculars and watched the backhoes return. They dug a trench right across the nesting ground and posted a sign, "Future Aspen Crest Pavilion, a place for us all." I felt like I was being buried under the weight of my own silence. That night, suspicion chewing at me, I pulled up the HOA's public records. And there it was. Arthur Vance, listed 3 times as a consulting legal advisor for HOA land acquisition strategy, all before he ever agreed to represent me. I almost laughed. The next morning, I marched into his office, threw the printed screenshots on his desk, and asked him to explain. He didn't deny it. He just steepled his fingers and gave me the kind of smile that usually comes with a knife between the ribs. "Technically, I'm not on retainer with them anymore," he said. "This is a small town, Mr. Cahill. I still represented you, didn't I?" Within the confines of professional boundaries. I walked out without another word. By noon, I'd fired Vance and filed a complaint with the state bar. By 2 p.m., I was in touch with a new lawyer, Dana Quinn, recommended by an old military contact. Dana didn't smile much. She also didn't blink when I showed her what Vance had done. "Classic sabotage," she said. "He delayed your filings and avoided pressing counterclaims. He was setting you up to lose. They're not just trying to take your land. They're trying to make an example out of you." I nodded slowly. "Then let's make one out of them instead. If there's one thing the Army teaches you, it's that when you're surrounded, you don't wait for permission to return fire." Dana and I went on the offensive. First stop, the State Cadastral Archive, that dusty old building where files still live in beige folders with string ties. Buried there was my silver bullet, a 1958 certified boundary map, stamped and sealed, showing unambiguously that the northern field was, and always had been, my parcel. Next, we hired Dr. Elena Rios, a private land surveyor with the kind of credibility and grit that doesn't melt under pressure. She ran a full 3D mapping of the property, satellite overlays, boundary validation. It all lined up with my grandfather's deed like perfect puzzle pieces. "They claim ambiguity," Elena told me. "They're lying." A few days later, Eleanor texted me late at night. "You didn't tell me who I was dealing with." "Call me tomorrow." "Something's up. We met at a diner." She slid a recorder across the table like it was a hand grenade. "Vanessa Thorne paid me a visit," she said. Elena played the audio. Vanessa's voice was syrupy, polite until it wasn't. "You have a chance to help your community, Elena, or you can help a man who's actively working against it. Think about what that choice means for your career." We added the recording to the pile, then a new detail arrived. An email pinged into a burner account I'd set up for tips. The subject line, "You didn't hear this from me." Attached were budget breakdowns, board minutes, and most importantly, emails between Arthur Vance and Vanessa Thorne, dated months before I'd met him. One line from Vanessa chilled me. "With Arthur handling him, it should be a clean process. He won't know until it's over." Now I had maps, recordings, a crooked lawyer, a recorded shakedown, and a mole behind enemy lines. I was building the case to burn their kingdom to the damn ground. The courtroom showdown felt too clean, too quiet. Dana Quinn was already inside, setting up like a general prepping for battle. I handed her the flash drive. Trail cam footage, Elena's 3D mapping, the archival deed, the email dump, and the audio of Vanessa trying to mafia her way through a licensed surveyor. We weren't there to survive anymore. We were there to bury them. Vanessa's legal team went first, painting me as an obstructionist hoarder clinging to the wilderness. They even tried to enter into the record a survey map that had magically appeared from HOA archives, a neat little document showing the pavilion zone crossing into a grey area of ownership. Dana stood up so slowly the bench creaked. "Your Honor," she said, voice calm. "That map is a forgery and I can prove it." She handed over the real documents, then she hit play on the audio recording. Vanessa Thorne's voice, clear and confident, filled the courtroom. "You have a chance to help your community, Elena, or you can help a man who's actively working against it." The courtroom went dead silent. I looked over at Vanessa. Her smile was gone now, just frozen teeth. Next came the bombshell. Dana introduced the affidavit from our anonymous source, Mr. D. His statement was read in full. I was tasked with removing digital records from the HOA server. The files I recovered show collusion between the board and attorney Arthur Vance, who was at the time representing Mr. Cahill. Vance advised the board on legal timing to maximize pressure. The judge's eyebrows shot up. It got worse. Dana called Dr. Rios to testify. Then came the trail cam footage, projected onto a monitor. It showed a group of HOA volunteers entering my property at night, removing my signs. The best part? One of them, clearly identifiable, was Vanessa Thorne herself, holding a hammer. The judge looked stunned. "I see no ambiguity here," she said sharply. "I see a private landowner being railroaded by an association with inflated authority and a troubling disregard for property law." 2 weeks after the hearing, I stood once again in courtroom B. The judge entered and got straight to it. "This court finds in favor of the defendant, Mr. Trevor Cahill. The property is, and has always been, under his legal and historical ownership. The HOA is ordered to cease all activities, remove any and all structures, and issue a formal retraction of its claims." Then came the hammer. "Furthermore, this court finds compelling evidence of fraudulent intent and legal misconduct. Vanessa Thorne is referred to the district attorney's office for charges including document forgery, conspiracy to defraud, and malicious trespass. Arthur Vance is referred to the state bar and criminal court for professional misconduct and fraud. The damages? $1.5 million in total, covering legal costs, land restoration, and what the court called severe reputational and emotional harm. As we stepped out into the sunlight, I wasn't in the mood for handshakes. Later that evening, I sat on my porch, watching the last of the pavilion signs get ripped out by a city work crew. The foundation they'd poured was already cracking under the fall air. The land was mine again. The first thing I did after the verdict wasn't celebrate. It was buy a new gate. Not just a gate, but a fully motorized, steel-reinforced, solar-powered piece of American over-engineering. The kind of thing that would stop a moose, or at least a golf cart full of entitled HOA board members. I had it installed along the north access path, right where the fake park entrance had been. Next came the trees, a dozen tall, thick, Rocky Mountain junipers planted in 2 neat rows along the field's edge. Symbolic, maybe, but I liked the idea of putting down roots in soil that someone else had tried to claim. I caught sight of Vanessa Thorne one last time. She wasn't wearing her pastel blazer, just a grey hoodie and oversized sunglasses, standing across the street, staring at the sign now bolted to my new gate. Private property, no public access. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Owner T. Cahill. She got back in an aging sedan with mismatched hubcaps and drove away. No one's seen her in the neighborhood since. The best moment came on a quiet Thursday morning. I was checking sensors when a boy, maybe 8, skinny arms and skinned knees, stood just beyond the boundary holding a soccer ball. "Hey," he said. "You're the guy with the land." "That's me." He looked around, like he wasn't supposed to be talking to me. My dad says you stopped the bad people. I nodded. Something like that. He kicked the ball, missed, and it rolled under the fence. He froze. Don't worry, I said, grabbing it and tossing it back over. Just this once. I stood there a while longer, listening to the breeze move through the junipers. No construction noise, no protests, no pamphlets taped to my mailbox. Just land, mine, and peace. Hard-earned, but real. Call to action. Look, my story is just one battle in a war that too many people are fighting with their own HOAs. Have you ever been pushed around by an association, or had someone try to redefine your boundaries? Was my victory justice, or did I go too far with the damages and the criminal referrals? Let me know in the comments below. Drop a like if you think land is sacred, and subscribe for more stories about what it truly takes to protect what's yours.